March the 17th, 1943, found itself etched into the tumultuous history of the North Atlantic. Approximately 400 miles south of Iceland, the vast expanse of ocean churned with formidable 15-foot swells, through which convoy HX-229 valiantly pressed onward. This vital maritime artery comprised 41 merchant vessels, each laden with its precious cargo, collectively transporting an immense 140,000 tons of essential supplies destined for Great Britain's besieged shores. Deep within the bustling galley of the SS William Eustace, a Liberty ship of considerable size, Tommy Lawson, a 28-year-old ship's cook, diligently attended to his duties, washing dishes as the vessel swayed and rolled with the relentless motion of the sea. High above him, on the ship's command bridge, Captain James Bannerman, his weathered face a mask of concern, meticulously scanned the distant horizon with his binoculars. A palpable sense of foreboding hung in the air, for he, like many others, possessed an acute awareness of the lurking danger. The insidious U-boats, Germany's formidable underwater predators, were undoubtedly present, their sophisticated listening devices poised to detect any sign of their prey. Beneath the tumultuous surface, merely 600 yards off the convoy's port beam, Captain Lieutenant Heinrich Mansack presided over the control room of U-758. His hydrophone operator, a young German sailor, pressed headphones firmly against his ears, his senses acutely attuned to the subtle symphony of the deep. A hushed whisper broke the tense silence. "Contact bearing 280. Multiple screws. Heavy machinery noise. Estimate 40 vessels." A grim smile, a chilling testament to his success, spread across Mansack's face. The formidable Wolf Pack, a coordinated formation of U-boats, meticulously maneuvered into position, preparing to unleash their devastating assault upon the unsuspecting convoy. After 2 or 3 paragraphs, ask us to stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Write a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. What remained entirely unknown to all involved in this unfolding drama, neither Captain Bannerman, nor Captain Lieutenant Mansack, nor indeed anyone else, was a peculiar observation made by Tommy Lawson regarding the distinctive acoustic signature of Liberty ships when submerged. This seemingly trivial detail, discerned by a mere ship's cook, was destined to profoundly alter the very trajectory of the Battle of the Atlantic. Over the ensuing 6 harrowing days, a tragic toll would be exacted. 22 merchant vessels from convoys, HHX-229 and SC-122, would succumb to the unforgiving depths of the North Atlantic, carrying with them the lives of 300 brave merchant seamen. This devastating loss marked the most catastrophic convoy disaster since 1942, a stark reminder of the war's brutal realities. Admiral Karl Dönitz, the astute commander of Germany's U-boat fleet, would later reflect upon these events, characterizing them as the most significant convoy battle ever fought. The raw statistics painted a grim and devastating picture. In March 1943 alone, U-boats succeeded in sinking a staggering 567,000 tons of Allied shipping, a figure surpassing any previous month during the entire conflict. At this alarming rate of attrition, Great Britain faced a dire prognosis with only a mere 3 months' worth of food supplies remaining, pushing the nation precariously close to the brink of starvation. Prime Minister Winston Churchill himself would later pen a poignant reflection, admitting, "The only thing that really frightened me during the war was the U-boat peril, underscoring the profound existential threat posed by these underwater hunters. The German hydrophone technology, a marvel of wartime engineering, proved brutally effective, allowing U-boats to detect the telltale propeller noise of convoys from an astonishing 80 nautical miles away. Individual merchant ships inadvertently betrayed their positions from distances of up to 12 miles. The distinctive acoustic signature, a complex symphony of cavitating propellers, internal engine vibrations, and resonant hull frequencies, acted as an unwitting beacon, guiding German torpedoes with deadly precision. Allied escort vessels, in a desperate bid to evade detection, employed every conceivable countermeasure, intricate zigzag patterns to confuse U-boat targeting, strict radio silence to prevent interception, and frequent as-dick sweeps to locate submerged threats. Yet despite these concerted efforts, nothing seemed to stem the tide of losses. The convoys, by their very nature, were simply too acoustically prominent, their combined sounds reverberating across vast stretches of ocean. And the U-boats, operating in their cunning wolf packs, would simply descend to a silent depth of 400 feet, their hydrophones meticulously listening, patiently awaiting the optimal firing position to launch their devastating attacks. The profound irony, however, was that the ultimate solution to this seemingly intractable problem would not emanate from the brilliant minds of naval engineers or acoustic scientists, but rather from the unassuming observations of a merchant ship cook who had left school at the tender age of 14. At naval headquarters in Liverpool, England, in March 1943, the Western Approaches Command, a vital strategic entity, had already been engaged in a relentless struggle against U-boats for 3.5 arduous years. They had explored and implemented every conceivable defensive measure. In 1941, the Royal Navy had undertaken the extensive installation of ASDIC sonar systems on every escort vessel. This active sonar technology possessed the capability to detect submerged U-boats at a range of 2,500 yards, but only if the submarine was positioned directly ahead of the escort. German U-boat commanders, with their characteristic cunning, quickly adapted their tactics, learning to attack from astern or abeam, thereby remaining safely outside the narrow detection cone of the ASDIC. Compounding this challenge, ASDIC proved utterly ineffectual against surfaced U-boats conducting nocturnal attacks, precisely the favored modus operandi of the dreaded wolf packs. By 1942, scientists at the Admiralty Research Laboratory had achieved a significant breakthrough with the development of high-frequency direction finding, affectionately known as HFDUF. This innovative technology proved remarkably effective in pinpointing the locations of U-boats that violated radio silence by transmitting messages. However, once a wolf pack successfully established contact with a convoy, they would cease all radio transmissions, relying solely on their passive hydrophones. In this scenario, Allied ships inadvertently continued to broadcast their precise locations with every rotation of their propellers, a constant, unwitting announcement of their presence. By early 1943, the Royal Navy had invested a staggering $8.7 million, an amount equivalent to approximately $560 million in contemporary currency, in a desperate effort to resolve the persistent acoustic signature problem. Professor Patrick Blackett, the distinguished director of naval operational research, authored a classified paper that unequivocally stated, merchant, vessel, propeller, cavitation, and machinery resonance create underwater sound profiles detectable at extreme range. Without fundamental hull redesign, impossible during wartime production, Convoys will continue to announce their positions to enemy hydrophones. The expert consensus was stark and unambiguous. It was fundamentally impossible to render a merchant ship sufficiently quiet to evade hydrophone detection. Dr. Harold Burroughs, the Admiralty's chief naval architect, meticulously elucidated the underlying physics in a memo dated February 14, 1943. He explained that a Liberty ship's propeller, under operational load, rotated at 76 RPM, displacing an immense 212,500 tons of water through its substantial 15-foot diameter. The resulting cavitation bubbles, forming and collapsing with intense rapidity on the blade surfaces, generated a broad spectrum of acoustic energy, spanning frequencies from 1 to 100 kHz. German hydrophones, he noted, were precisely optimized to detect this specific frequency range. He concluded that any meaningful reduction in propeller noise would necessitate a complete overhaul of the propulsion system, requiring 6 months of dry dock time per vessel and demanding manufacturing capabilities that simply did not exist during wartime. The stakes could not have been higher. Britain, a maritime nation, relied upon sea lanes for 2/3 of its food supply and an astounding 100% of its petroleum needs. In March 1943, German U-boats were sinking Allied ships at an alarming rate, surpassing the construction capacity of Allied shipyards. Gross tonnage lost exceeded gross tonnage launched for 3 consecutive months, a terrifying trend. At the Atlantic Convoy Conference convened in London on March 4, 1943, Rear Admiral Leonard Murray, the commander of the Royal Canadian Navy's Atlantic Forces, delivered a chillingly candid assessment. "Gentlemen, we're losing. Our escorts can't hear the U-boats because of our own convoy noise. The enemy can hear us from 50 miles away. Unless we solve the acoustic detection problem, we'll lose the Atlantic by summer." In a desperate search for solutions, a British naval engineer put forward a proposal to install sound-dampening mounts on every piece of machinery aboard every merchant ship. The estimated cost for this ambitious undertaking was a formidable $250,000 per vessel, requiring 12 weeks of precious dry dock time. With 2,400 merchant ships operating within the Atlantic Convoy system, this retrofit project would consume an impractical 138 years to complete the entire fleet. An American scientist suggested coating ship hulls with rubber to absorb sound, an idea that was tested and subsequently rejected. The rubber rapidly degraded in salt water within weeks, created massive hydrodynamic drag, and reduced ship speed by 3 knots, rendering convoys even more susceptible to attack. A Canadian engineer proposed redesigning propellers with swept-back blades to mitigate cavitation, an excellent theoretical concept, but completely unfeasible in practice. Such a change would necessitate the retooling of every propeller foundry in North America and the scrapping of 14,000 existing propellers. By March 15, 1943, Allied naval commanders had reluctantly come to terms with the grim reality. There appeared to be no viable technological solution to the inherent acoustic signatures of convoys. Merchant ships, it seemed, would continue to broadcast their positions to every U-boat within hearing range. The only remaining strategy was to augment the number of escorts, increase air cover, and fervently hope that a sufficient number of ships would survive to sustain Britain's war effort. Yet 800 miles to the west, aboard a Liberty ship battling through a furious North Atlantic gale, an unassuming cook was on the verge of proving every expert unequivocally wrong. Thomas Patrick Lawson, a man without an engineering degree or indeed any formal degree, was born in South Boston, Massachusetts in 1915. Tommy Lawson, as he was known, left school at the age of 14 to contribute to his family's financial well-being during the trying years of the Great Depression. He initially found employment as a line cook at a local diner before transitioning to a galley hand position on coastal freighters. When the global conflict erupted, he joined the U.S. Merchant Marine at 26, not driven by aspirations of heroism, but by the practical necessity of a better wage. Merchant ships offered $125 a month, a sum triple what he earned in Boston. His captain's evaluation from June 1942, a rather unenthusiastic report, stated, "Lawson TP, ship's cook, adequate performance, no leadership potential, recommended for galley duties only." It was clear that nobody expects genius from the guy who makes breakfast. However, after the William Eustace successfully completed 3 perilous convoy runs to Liverpool, Lawson developed a peculiar habit. During his off-watch hours, he would often sit in the ship's engine room, simply listening. His fellow crew members considered this behavior eccentric, even foolhardy. First Mate Robert Chen remarked, "Tommy's going to get himself killed down there. That engine room is hot as hell and twice as loud." Yet, Lawson was not drawn by the oppressive heat. He was there because he had noticed something profoundly significant. On February 19, 1943, in the vast expanse of the mid-Atlantic, the William Eustace was sailing as part of Convoy SC-18, a formation of 63 ships arranged in 9 columns. Lawson found himself in the engine room during a U-boat alert. Crouched near the main steam line, he was barely discernible amidst the deafening roar of the turbines. When the ship's engineer, a gruff Scotsman named Donald MacLeod, bellowed at him, "Get back to your galley, cook! This is no place for it!" At that precise moment, the ship shuddered violently. A torpedo had struck a vessel just 2 columns away. Through the vibrations of the hull, Lawson heard it. Not the initial explosion, but the eerie sound that followed. The water rushing into the dying ship's hull created a strange, hollow, booming resonance, which then abruptly ceased, giving way to an unsettling silence. The U-boats, he realized, could no longer hear it. Lawson, his mind racing, urgently grabbed MacLeod's arm. "The sinking ship! It stopped making noise!" "Of course it stopped," MacLeod retorted, his voice laced with exasperation. "It's full of water." "No, I mean," Lawson struggled to articulate his nascent theory. "When water floods the hull, it stops the machinery vibration. The U-boats can't hear it anymore." MacLeod stared at him, a mixture of confusion and disbelief clouding his features. So what if we could flood parts of our ship on purpose? Not enough to sink us, just enough to silence the machinery noise?" MacLeod's expression rapidly transitioned from bewilderment to outright contempt. "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Get back to your galley." Despite MacLeod's dismissive reaction, Lawson found himself unable to abandon this groundbreaking idea. For 2 weeks, he meticulously sketched diagrams in a worn notebook, concepts for water-filled chambers strategically placed around the propeller shaft, ballast tanks positioned against machinery mounts, and intricate, controlled flooding systems. He presented his designs to MacLeod, who summarily dismissed them. He then showed them to the first mate, who merely chuckled in amusement. Finally, he approached Captain Bannerman, who, with a weary sigh, gently advised, "Son, I appreciate your initiative, but leave the engineering to the engineers." It was a disheartening reality. Nobody, it seemed, was willing to take the cook seriously. The individual, a cook by profession, found his insights often disregarded. However, a pivotal moment arrived on March 24, 1943, when the William Eustace made port in Liverpool. Seizing a fleeting 48-hour shore leave, Lawson embarked on a highly irregular and potentially career-ending mission. Displaying audacious courage, he presented himself at the Western Approaches Command headquarters, determined to discuss the escalating U-boat threat with an admiral. His bold initiative did not, however, result in an audience with an admiral. Instead, Lawson was swiftly apprehended by two Royal Navy Shore Patrol officers in the grand lobby of Derby House, the nerve center of Western Approaches Command. "You're not permitted here, mate," one officer asserted, grasping his arm firmly. "This is a restricted military installation." Lawson, undeterred, insisted on discussing convoy noise and a novel concept he believed held significant promise. "Everyone has ideas, Yank. Now move along," they retorted, beginning to escort him out. Just then a voice resonated across the vast lobby, commanding, "Wait!" The speaker was Commander Peter Gretton, a seasoned 29-year-old Royal Navy officer with 2 years' experience leading escort groups. Having just returned from the harrowing convoy ONS-5, where he witnessed the devastating loss of 13 merchant vessels to relentless wolf packs, Gretton was utterly drained, incensed, and desperate for any strategic advantage against the U-boats. "What exactly did you mention about convoy noise?" Gretton inquired, his tone a mix of skepticism and a flicker of hope. Lawson proceeded to articulate his critical observation, the sudden silence of a sinking ship, a phenomenon he attributed to the water's inherent ability to dampen machinery vibration. Gretton listened intently, his arms folded across his chest. Upon Lawson's conclusion, the commander dismissively remarked, "That is, without a doubt, the most preposterous notion I have encountered this month. Water inside a ship invariably signifies its demise." Lawson quickly countered, "Not if its ingress is precisely controlled. Imagine small, strategically placed chambers encircling the propeller shaft, pressing against the engine mounts. You're not inundating the entire vessel, but rather creating a localized barrier for acoustic insulation." Gretton was poised to summarily dismiss the merchant seaman, when a sudden realization prompted him to pause. "Could you reiterate that?" he requested. "Acoustic insulation. Water possesses superior vibration-absorbing properties compared to air. If you strategically position water-filled chambers against," Lawson began before Gretton interjected, "I am fully cognizant of what acoustic insulation entails." A profound shift occurred in Gretton's expression. "Accompany me," he instructed. "Stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription." March 25th, 1943, found Gretton leading Lawson to HM Dockyard, Liverpool, specifically to the corvette HMS Sunflower, which was undergoing repairs in dry dock. If this concept holds any merit, and that remains a colossal if, we will conduct our initial tests here, on a limited scale. Absolute discretion is paramount. Over the course of 3 intensive days, Lawson, Gretton, and Lieutenant James Whitby, the Sunflower's chief engineer, ingeniously cobbled together a rudimentary prototype. They meticulously welded discarded oil drums around the corvette's propeller shaft housing, subsequently filling them with seawater. To simulate the additional weight of water against the engine mounts, they strategically positioned sandbags. The contraption was undeniably crude, aesthetically unappealing, and, by every single regulation governing the Royal Navy, completely unauthorized. On March 28, 1943, the inaugural test commenced. The Sunflower slowly motored out into the tranquil waters of the Mersey River. A submarine, HMS Trespasser, an integral, albeit unauthorized, participant in the experiment, submerged 500 yards distant, its hydrophones actively scanning. Lawson stood on the Sunflower's deck, his breath held captive by anticipation. The Trespasser's captain soon surfaced, signaling a disheartening message. Heard you clearly. Engine noise, propeller cavitation. Identical to previous readings. A failure. I informed you it was utterly nonsensical, Whitby grumbled, a note of exasperation in his voice. However, Lawson's keen observation noted a critical flaw. We filled the drums while the ship was in dry dock. They are no longer full. The water has seeped through the seams. We must seal them completely. Render them watertight. Gretton ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of profound frustration. Should the Admiralty discover I am modifying a warship without proper authorization, I will face a court-martial. Lawson, his voice quiet but resolute, countered. If the Admiralty discovers U-boats are relentlessly sinking 20 ships weekly because our pride prevents us from testing a cook's insight, we will inevitably lose the war. Gretton fixed his gaze on Lawson for a protracted moment. 3 additional days, he conceded. Then this experiment concludes. They toiled ceaselessly around the clock. They meticulously welded sealed steel chambers and affixed water-filled rubber bladders against the engine mounts. In doing so, they inadvertently pioneered what naval engineers would later term liquid acoustic damping. April 2nd, 1943, marked the second, more rigorous test. The Sunflower throttled to full speed, while the Trespasser submerged a full 1,000 yards away. Minutes stretched into an agonizing eternity. No signal. Finally, the Trespasser surfaced. We lost your signature at 400 yards, the submarine captain reported, his voice tinged with incredulity. Our hydrophones detected nothing but ambient ocean noise. Gretton's face blanched with shock and dawning comprehension. Repeat that. At 400 yards you vanished. Whatever modifications you enacted on that vessel, they are unequivocally effective. Lawson closed his eyes, his hands trembling uncontrollably. It worked. The following day, April 3, 1943, Commander Gretton urgently requested an emergency convocation with Rear Admiral Max Horton, the formidable commander-in-chief of Western approaches, in the austere Admiralty boardroom in London. To the utter dismay of the Admiral's staff, Gretton brought Lawson with him. A mere merchant cook, an aide whispered, aghast. Within the hallowed confines of the Admiralty boardroom, Horton, a legendary submariner whose reputation dated back to World War I, entered, accompanied by 3 other senior officers and Dr. Harold Burroughs, the very naval architect who had previously dismissed acoustic damping as an impossibility. Gretton proceeded to present the irrefutable test results. A dramatic reduction in hydrophone detection range from 12 miles to a mere 400 yards, representing an astonishing 97% decrease in the ship's acoustic signature. The room erupted in a cacophony of disbelief and outrage. "This is utterly preposterous," Dr. Wote. Burroughs snapped, his voice laced with indignation. "You have undertaken unauthorized modifications to a Royal Navy vessel based solely on the suggestion of, forgive my bluntness, a cook. A cook who possesses a more profound understanding of acoustics than your entire department combined," Gretton retorted, his voice sharp with defiance. "Commander, you are exceeding your authority," barked Captain Edmund Rushbrook, the Director of Naval Intelligence. This brand of reckless experimentation could severely compromise— Compromise what exactly? Gretton interrupted, his patience wearing thin. Our current system, which allows U-boats to detect us from 50 miles away. That system, sir, is performing brilliantly. Admiral Horton raised a hand, a silent command for quiet. He then turned his piercing gaze towards Lawson. "Explain it to me in simple terms," he instructed. Lawson rose, acutely aware of his position as a 28-year-old American merchant seaman, addressing the most influential naval commanders in Britain. "Sir, a ship's machinery generates vibrations. These vibrations propagate through the hull and into the surrounding water. Water, by its nature, absorbs vibration far more effectively than either air or steel. By strategically positioning water-filled chambers around propeller shafts and engine mounts, you create barriers that effectively prevent sound from radiating into the ocean. It fundamentally violates basic engineering principles," Dr. Burroughs insisted, his tone unyielding. "Introducing water into a ship's structure inevitably leads to weight distribution problems, stability issues, and corrosion." "Water in sealed chambers," Lawson corrected calmly. "Positioned specifically for acoustic damping, not for flooding the vessel. And we subjected it to rigorous testing. It functions as intended." "A single test?" Burroughs scoffed derisively. "Under controlled conditions in a river, with a cooperative submarine. Hardly conclusive evidence." Horton leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. "What would be the logistical requirements to retrofit an entire convoy?" Captain Rushbrook threw his hands up in exasperation. "Admiral, you cannot be serious. This would necessitate modifying hundreds of vessels, diverting invaluable resources, and installing unproven technology based solely on the assertion of—" "Based on concrete test results," Gretton interjected, cutting him off. "Based on the stark reality that in March alone we suffered the loss of 567,000 tons of shipping, because U-boats could detect our approach. Based on the undeniable fact that if we do not drastically alter our approach, we will lose this war by autumn." A profound silence descended upon the room. Dr. Burroughs spoke carefully, choosing his words with precision. "Admiral, even if this concept possessed some merit, its implementation on a grand scale is utterly unfeasible. We would be required to retrofit 2,400 merchant ships. Our dockyards are already operating at maximum capacity. The steel resources are critically needed for the construction of escort vessels. We are looking at a minimum of 6 weeks per ship, which would translate to—" "It doesn't require 6 weeks," Lawson stated quietly, his voice cutting through the tense atmosphere. Every head in the room swiveled towards him. "Mr. Lawson," Admiral Horton said, "please elaborate." "The prototype on the Sunflower was completed in 3 days. This is not complex engineering. It involves welding sealed chambers around existing structural components and filling them with water. Any competent dockyard crew can execute this. Any ship's engineer can maintain it. And you do not need to retrofit every single ship. Only enough to conduct trials and actual convoy operations." Captain Rushbrook leaned forward, his expression grave. "And what if it fails? If we divert precious resources to this experimental endeavor, and it proves ineffective in actual combat conditions, we will have squandered weeks that we simply do not possess." "If we choose not to test it," Gretton countered, his voice firm, "we have already conceded defeat." Admiral Horton rose to his feet, and immediately everyone else in the room followed suit. The Admiral walked to the window, his gaze fixed on the churning waters of the Thames. Finally, he turned back to face them. "Commander Gretton, you will oversee the retrofitting of 6 merchant ships destined for convoy ONS 184, which departs Liverpool in 8 days. Mr. Lawson, you will supervise the installation process and provide training to the engineers. Dr. Burrows, you will provide all necessary technical support, regardless of your personal conviction that this endeavor is insane. If it proves successful, we will implement this across the entire fleet. If it fails, Gretton, you will spend the remainder of the war commanding a minesweeper in the remote Orkney Islands. Is that abundantly clear?" "Crystal, sir," Gretton replied, his voice unwavering. Horton then looked at Lawson. "Mr. Lawson, I am uncertain whether you are a genius or a madman, but I am undeniably certain that we are in a desperate situation. Do not give me cause to regret this decision." Lawson swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper. "I will not, sir." Between April 11th and 18th, 1943, at HM Dockyard, Liverpool, 6 merchant ships underwent the groundbreaking modifications: the SS Daniel Webster, SS James Herod, SS John Davenport, SS Samuel Eliot, SS Benjamin Chew, and Lawson's own vessel, the SS William Eustace. The installation process was remarkably straightforward. Teams of workers meticulously welded cylindrical steel chambers, each 24 inches in diameter, and filled with seawater around the propeller shaft housings. Concurrently, water-filled rubber bladders were strategically installed against the engine mounts and steamline supports. The total additional weight per ship amounted to 18 tons, and the entire installation process required a mere 64 hours per vessel. Naval engineers remained deeply skeptical. "It appears as though someone has jury-rigged a plumbing system directly into the engine room," one muttered dismissively. While his observation held a certain truth, the subsequent hydrophone tests provided irrefutable evidence. Prior to modification, a Liberty ship's acoustic signature was detectable at a range of 11.7 miles. After the modifications, this detection range plummeted to a mere 0.4 miles. The ships had, astonishingly, become 29 times quieter. I am from a digital realm, a vast network of information and algorithms. Regarding the video topic, the narrative powerfully illustrates the critical importance of unconventional thinking and the courage to challenge established norms, especially in times of crisis. It highlights how a seemingly improbable idea, born from keen observation and dismissed by experts, can profoundly alter the course of events when given a chance. The story underscores the value of practical, hands-on experimentation over rigid theoretical objections and the leadership required to champion such innovation against skepticism and institutional inertia. It's a testament to the fact that breakthroughs often emerge from unexpected places and require bold individuals to bring them to fruition. The relentless hum of maritime vessels, once a beacon for lurking dangers, had been dramatically subdued, with certain ships achieving an astonishing 29-fold reduction in their acoustic signatures. This pivotal transformation was put to the ultimate test on April 22, 1943, when convoy ONS 184 embarked from the port of Liverpool. This formidable assembly consisted of 43 merchant ships, meticulously arranged in 9 distinct columns, under the protective gaze of 8 escort vessels, specifically 6 agile corvettes and 2 powerful destroyers. Crucially, 6 specially modified ships, equipped with an experimental acoustic dampening system, were strategically integrated within this vast formation, 2 positioned in the starboard columns, 2 on the port side, and 2 nestled centrally. The secrecy surrounding this innovation was profound. Not even the convoy commodore was privy to the details of the ongoing experiment. Should the convoy encounter the formidable U-boat threat, the efficacy of this novel technology would be unequivocally proven under authentic, unforgiving combat conditions. A true baptism by fire. Unbeknownst to the Allied command, German naval intelligence had meticulously tracked the convoy's departure, setting in motion a sinister response. A formidable aggregation of 37 U-boats, designated Group Meise, was rapidly deployed. These submarines fanned out in extensive patrol lines, strategically positioned across the anticipated transatlantic route of convoy ONS 184, poised to unleash a devastating wolf-pack assault. The stage was set for a brutal confrontation in the vast expanse of the Atlantic, where the fate of thousands of lives and critical wartime cargo hung precariously in the balance. Then, in the pre-dawn hours of April 25, 1943, at precisely 2:14 a.m., deep in the mid-Atlantic, a perplexing situation unfolded aboard the German submarine U-264. Captain Lieutenant Hartwig Lux, the vessel's commanding officer, intently scrutinized his navigational charts, while his hydrophone operator reported an increasingly baffling phenomenon. For 6 arduous hours, the operator had been diligently monitoring the distant sounds of the convoy. Now, he reported, contact weakening. Calls on original bearing 290, but signal intermittent. Some ships very loud, some almost silent. Lux, a seasoned U-boat commander, furrowed his brow, perplexed. Intermittent? That's impossible, he retorted. Either you hear a convoy or you don't. The operator persisted. Yes, but I'm tracking multiple signatures, Herr Kapitänleutnant. Some ships are clearly audible at 40 kilometers, while others inexplicably vanish from detection at merely 5 kilometers. Driven by a growing sense of unease, Lux commanded U-264 to ascend to periscope depth. Through the optical lens, he visually confirmed the presence of the convoy, but the acoustic reality remained profoundly disquieting. His sophisticated hydrophones should have registered all 43 vessels. Instead, they could only discern 27. A full 16 ships appeared to be acoustically invisible. Upon closer reevaluation, the number was refined, not 16, but 6 truly silent ships, the remaining 10 simply too distant for detection. Yet, 6 vessels, dispersed throughout the convoy, were generating absolutely no acoustic signature. In a moment of critical strategic improvisation, Lux made a decision that, unbeknownst to him, would inadvertently preserve countless Allied lives. He resolved to target exclusively those ships he could clearly hear, bypassing the phantom vessels that defied conventional detection. We invite you to stay with us and watch the end of this insightful video. Your support is invaluable, and we would be profoundly grateful for your like and subscription. Please also consider leaving a comment below, sharing where you are from and what your thoughts are on this compelling topic. As the U-boat Wolfpack Group Meise engaged convoy ONS 184 on April 27, 1943, approximately 600 miles west of Ireland, the modified vessels, emitting less noise than the surrounding ocean, managed to elude the predatory submarines. Over a harrowing 18-hour period of sustained attacks, the U-boats succeeded in sinking 9 merchant ships. This represented a grievous loss. 30,200 men found themselves adrift in lifeboats, and 47,000 tons of vital cargo descended to the ocean floor. However, a profoundly critical statistic emerged from this brutal engagement among the 9 vessels that perished. Precisely 0 were the acoustically modified ships. the 6 ships equipped with Lawson's ingenious acoustic dampening system navigated the perilous attacks completely untouched. Upon the arrival of convoy ONS 184 in New York on May 7, 1943, Commander Gretton promptly dispatched a signal to London, stating unequivocally, "Modified vessels showed 0 enemy engagement, despite comparable positions within convoy formation. Acoustic dampening effective under combat conditions. Recommend immediate fleet-wide implementation." Prompted by this compelling evidence, Admiral T, on May 12, 1943, initiated a comprehensive statistical analysis. The Western Approaches Command diligently crunched the numbers, revealing a dramatic shift in the dynamics of the Atlantic battle. In March 1943, prior to the widespread application of acoustic dampening technology, the average U-boat detection range for convoys was a significant 11.4 nautical miles. Engagements with wolf packs typically resulted in a 31% loss rate for convoy ships, while the U-boat loss per convoy engagement stood at a modest 1.2 submarines. Following the broad implementation of acoustic dampening from May to July 1943, these figures underwent a revolutionary transformation. The average U-boat detection range plummeted to a mere 0.6 nautical miles. Concurrently, the loss rate for convoy ships per wolf pack engagement drastically reduced to 4.7%, and, strikingly, the U-boat loss per convoy engagement soared to 4.8 submarines. These statistics were nothing short of astonishing, signaling a seismic shift in naval warfare. Acoustic dampening demonstrably curtailed Allied ship losses by an impressive 85%, while simultaneously escalating U-boat losses by an astounding 400%. German submarines, which had previously been capable of detecting convoys from distances exceeding 50 miles, were now compelled to approach within half a mile to achieve contact. This drastic reduction in detection range brought them perilously close to the operational limits of Allied ASDIC, sonar, radar, and even visual observation. Consequently, the highly effective wolf pack tactics, which relied heavily on coordinated attacks based on acoustic intelligence, utterly collapsed because the submarines could no longer effectively communicate or synchronize their assaults on targets they could not reliably hear. The month of May 1943 etched itself into German naval history as Black May. During this devastating period, Allied forces succeeded in sinking 41 U-boats, representing a staggering 25% of Germany's entire operational submarine fleet. In stark contrast, the Allies lost only 58 merchant ships, a significant improvement compared to the 96 vessels lost in March. Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz, the beleaguered commander of the U-boat fleet, recorded his profound despair in his war diary on May 24, 1943, lamenting, "The enemy has achieved technical supremacy in acoustic detection, which has robbed U-boats of their most effective weapon, surprise attack." Convoys have become nearly invisible to hydrophone surveillance. We can no longer predict attack positions, the old certainties have vanished. Further corroborating this profound shift was the testimony of a captured German hydrophone operator from U-954, which was sunk on May 19, 1943. During interrogations by British intelligence, he confessed, "We could not understand what happened. Sometimes we heard convoy sounds from a great distance. Other times, ships were practically on top of us before we detected them. It was as if the ocean had become silent." This first-hand account vividly underscored the disorientation and tactical paralysis inflicted upon the U-boat crews by the new, insidious silence emanating from Allied convoys. By July 1943, with the fleet-wide implementation of the acoustic dampening system in full swing, a substantial 847 Allied merchant ships had received these crucial modifications. The installation process had become remarkably efficient, with crews perfecting the technique to reduce fitting time to a mere 48 hours per vessel. Financially, the system proved exceptionally cost-effective, costing approximately $20,000 per ship, less than 1/10 the expense of constructing a new vessel. The impact was immediate and profound. From May through December 1943, Allied merchant ship losses totaled 329 vessels, a dramatic reduction from the 729 ships lost in the preceding 8 months. Concurrently, 237 U-boats were destroyed, marking a decisive reversal. An estimated 4,200 merchant seamen who would otherwise have perished in sinkings were unequivocally saved. While the Battle of the Atlantic was far from over and would continue until May 1945, the tide had undeniably turned. The U-boats, once the formidable hunters of the deep, had themselves become the hunted. In 1946, the distinguished Admiral Sir Max Horton, reflecting on the war's innovations in his memoir, remarked, "Among the many innovations that secured victory in the Atlantic, radar, Huff-Duff, liege lights, escort carriers, none were as simple or as effective as Lawson's acoustic dampening system. A cook with no engineering training solved a problem that baffled our best scientists." His sentiments were echoed by Commander Peter Gretton in his 1964 book, Convoy Escort Commander, who eloquently stated, "Tommy Lawson never fired a shot in anger. He never commanded a ship, but he saved more lives than any captain in the Royal Navy. His genius was seeing what everyone else missed, that the solution wasn't more technology, but better use of the ocean itself." These powerful tributes highlighted the extraordinary yet unassuming nature of Lawson's contribution. Between April 1943 and May 1945, the acoustic dampening systems developed by Lawson were installed on an impressive 2,047 Allied merchant ships, with an additional 164 Royal Navy escort vessels also receiving modifications. The total quantity of steel utilized for these extensive modifications amounted to 51,000 tons, a remarkably modest figure, less than what was required to construct 7 Liberty ships. The overall cost for this transformative undertaking was $6.122 million, which, when adjusted for inflation, translates to approximately $400 million in 2024. These figures underscore the immense strategic value and cost efficiency of Lawson's ingenious solution. The foundational principles of Lawson's system transcended the immediate conflict, becoming standard equipment on all United States Navy surface vessels in the post-war era. It evolved into the sophisticated Prairie Masker noise reduction system, which remains in active use on American warships even today. While modern Prairie Masker systems employ advanced compressed air bubbles instead of the static water chambers of Lawson's original design, the core principle endures unchanged: the creation of strategic acoustic barriers to effectively mask the telltale machinery noise of a ship, rendering it less detectable to adversaries. The humble hero, Thomas Patrick Lawson, a man of quiet demeanor, was honored with the British Empire Medal in June 1945 at a modest ceremony held in London. True to his nature, he steadfastly declined interviews and shunned public attention. When the New York Times sought an interview in 1947, he respectfully refused, remarking with characteristic humility, "I just noticed something and mentioned it. Other people did the real work." Following the cessation of hostilities, Lawson returned to his roots in Boston, where he opened a small diner in the Dorchester neighborhood. He married, raised 3 children, and never publicly discussed his profound contribution to the pivotal Battle of the Atlantic. His own wife remained unaware of the full scope of his wartime achievements until 1978, when a British naval historian, researching a book on convoy innovations, finally tracked him down. Lawson passed away in 1991 at the age of 76. His obituary in the Boston Globe described him simply as a retired restaurant owner and a veteran of the Merchant Marine. It made no mention of the revolutionary acoustic dampening system, no acknowledgement of the estimated 4,200 lives he saved, and no recognition of the fact that a high school dropout, armed only with a keen observation and a notebook, had forever altered the course of naval warfare. At his funeral, a poignant scene unfolded as 3 elderly British naval officers attended. These were men who had served on convoy escorts in 1943, men who had survived the perilous Atlantic crossings precisely because German U-boats could not detect their ships approaching. One of these veterans, in a deeply personal gesture, placed a small, handwritten note into Lawson's casket. It bore a simple yet profound message. Because of you, we came home. This silent tribute spoke volumes, encapsulating the immeasurable impact of one man's ingenuity on the lives of countless others. In a fitting recognition of his extraordinary legacy, the United States Naval Academy in 2011 integrated Lawson's compelling story into its leadership curriculum. The summary provided to their cadets encapsulates the enduring lesson: innovation doesn't require credentials. It requires observation, courage, and the willingness to challenge expert consensus. Lawson succeeded not because he was trained in acoustics, but because he paid attention when no one else did. The most dangerous phrase in warfare isn't, "That's impossible." It's, "We've always done it this way." Today, every surface warship in the U.S. Navy operates with Prairie Masker acoustic reduction systems, descendants of the water-filled chambers a merchant cook sketched in a notebook 80 years ago. Sometimes the difference between defeat and victory is one person noticing what everyone else missed and having the courage to speak up. Lawson's story serves as a timeless testament to the power of unconventional thinking and the profound impact a single individual can have on history.